All right, welcome everybody. We were going to be doing a tier list as well for the Persona 5 Royal Palaces. I'm going to be rating these based on my overall personal enjoyment, but I do like to have a couple rules that set apart the actual dungeons themselves and give me a framework as to how to rank them rather than just kind of putting them up there without really explaining all the details for it. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to give them a point for every positive in these categories as I list them. And if they get a point, they move up from C tier going up. And if they have a net negative over all of these categories here, even if they get positives in some, then they'll move down. First thing I would say that's most important with any of them is the overall presentation. That goes into things like the actual soundtrack, level design, the enemies within the palace. Pick a theme! Second category is the story associated with this palace. I think that's a big portion of things to encompass there. That's not just the storyline surrounding, why we're going into the palace, but the conflict set up between what confidant is maybe a part of this palace as well. And then, of course, the boss themselves, the antagonist, the boss fight. All right, let's see how well this does. Wait! No! And then if they absolutely crush it in all three of those categories, they just hit that X factor, that sweet spot there. They'll move into my top of the top bit here and be an S+. Kamoshida's in terms of presentation was probably one of the ones that I didn't think I would like as much in the long run. I felt like the means by which that most of it was a tutorial would actually hold it back in a lot of ways. In terms of what it gave us for setting up the theme and the feel of the game, I knew this one was decently solid in terms of presentation. I don't know if I'd give it a full point though for presentation. Story-wise though, this is one of the ones, that was one of the better ones. The story and the way that they weaved in multiple confidants because they had to set up both An and Ryuji with this palace was really strong. The whole arc connecting it with Shiho and Kamoshida being a presence in the school, I think is such a strong aspect of that. I also think that the school itself being the palace involved with that in the story, I think was really strong. Honestly, would say that the story aspect of it is the best part of this dungeon. It really feels terrifying how out of our depth we are, given that Joker and Ryuji are still just kind of trying to figure this out. So I think that immediately puts it into a positive. As far as a boss goes, this has probably one of the best bosses in the game as far as the way that as an antagonist, he's set up so well to be this oppressive, terrifying, personal force that's against us here. Yeah, it's a great first villain. The fight itself against him was relatively simple. It was a good kind of starter bridge, I would say, into the rest of the game here. So I think that it's an easy A tier. I would say it's potentially the highest A tier you can get without going fully into S tier. Madarame's Palace had a very clear step up in terms of presentation. I would say that the overall vibe, music, the Museum of Vanity, the museum aspect I thought was really cool. I loved a lot of the ways in which the palace set you up well for the visual storytelling of this arc here. Presentation wise, I think it's really good. I don't really remember the music that strongly here, and yet every other aspect of the presentation was just so much to my liking that I will easily give it a point for presentation. The story integration here is probably another one where they kept up the quality from things with Kamoshida in my mind. The way in which it really does feel like we are going through this museum that is honoring the ways in which this thief essentially has taken and stolen and robbed of these people, of these kids. It feels like a monument to his vanity, basically. And so the idea of wanting to infiltrate it and destroy it and take back from it feels so good in the story here. Yusuke's emotional core through the story is really good. I did think that they kind of threw away a bit of the nuance at the end of things with the palace as far as story-wise goes, but I also liked the way in which this was the first palace where we were kind of needing to go into the real world and do some things with an adult character that could very easily have gotten us screwed over if things didn't go really well. So I think the blending of the story and the palace itself was another plus, so I would put this up again as well. And then for the boss, in a weird way, I actually think Madarame as a boss fight was actually kind of mid. I think that the best thing about Madarame is the persona that he puts on of being this absolutely honorable citizen that's put everything together. You know, he's, very just good person. But then when you see him in the palace, you go, yep, that's actually who he is. That's absolutely who he is. As far as the overall mechanics for him, I think that the best thing about his boss fight is the fact that there's many different things to target. I think that introducing that was a success. And I think Atlas either knew that or just obviously really liked the response for players from that part specifically and used that in all of the best boss fights in the end game. I do think that he was kind of a forgettable fight. While his character was fantastic, I do think that it's still overall like just a bit below experience-wise for me for the Kamoshida one here. Yeah, I think that a more, maybe a little bit better handling of the storyline side of things with the potential for nuance at the end, I think holds it back, and I think that the boss fight itself at the end was a little bit lackluster. The story integration was really good for the majority of it, and the presentation-wise side of things is really good. Actually, you know what? The presentation of the tutorial part of it does hold back Kamoshida's a little bit. So I think I'm not really being fair for the fact that Kamoshida's kind of has to be a little bit weaker because of so much of it being a tutorial. Kaneshiro, I think that this is one of those classic examples where the presentation of this dungeon is phenomenal. The idea of having the bank heist with all the puzzles and all the clever arrangements of the rooms and stuff. Yeah, the music is phenomenal. I very much remember the music well. And overall, just the feeling of going in and stealing from this was definitely like amazing. Like wonderful presentation as far as things go there. I did not like the story integration. I think that this is actually the only palace that has a negative in story integration. I would say that that's actually a part that really holds this back, so I would knock that down a peg. But I don't think that the boss, antagonist, and fight itself is really that bad. I think that the boss fight was really cool. I think that the overall idea of taking down an independent, non-impersonal threat was really good, but it's just the way that was handled in the story and the plot was really But the actual boss fight was very memorable, very fun. I liked the multiple phases to it. But yeah, Kaneshiro as a character, I wouldn't put this as a whole negative. I think that this is more a neutral, no points kind of thing there. So I would put Kaneshiro in C tier. All right, Futaba. Probably the most immediate S tier of all of these palaces so far. I don't even really have to question this too much. Presentation wise, I loved the cognition, the visuals surrounding it of the pyramid, this sealed away tomb that we need to go and free Futaba from, but then the revelation that Futaba's not the antagonist. It's the cognition that she has of her mother, which was ultimately a lie. Story integration-wise is fantastic in that regard. In fact, the only thing I would say that is probably the weakest bit here with as far as story integration is that it's in those moments where you're interacting with the hieroglyphs of Futaba, but the actual way in which it blends in with the rest of the palace feels a little bit wonky in the pacing of it. I would say that it's really carried by high moments, but I would say overall the flow of it isn't really evenly paced out for me. I didn't really like that part of it, but still overall carries it just enough for me. So that's probably the part that I would focus on there. But then for the boss fight and the boss itself, easy positive. The false cognition of her mom being the antagonist is such a cool twist for this. And then also having it be this gigantic spectacle of a flying sphinx that's just absolutely dominating the space when we had gone from being cooped up within the pyramid and everything is kind of claustrophobic to then having this open space because Futaba's now free. I think it was wonderful. It's not very difficult or challenging or not a very unique fight in terms of the mechanics of things there, because if you know my playthrough, I just used Tetracarn and I didn't even realize it was considered cheese, but yep, I do not think this is anywhere close to S+ tier, but I would say this is definitely a low to mid S tier. But now we go to Okumura. This is the spaceship. Presentation wise, I would say this one was okay. I don't really remember the music that well. The overall kind of way that you're brought through the dungeon isn't super fun. I think it was a bit tedious in that regard. Story integration, okay. I think in a lot of ways, this is kind of one of the weird situations where this has like a lot of neutral things about it where they're not super positive or super negative. But the thing that's the weirdest part for me and the thing I want to speak on the most is that like, I think this is the boss that I the least care about. And also of all the antagonists in the story, I really didn't vibe with it as much. So if we had to give it neutral in presentation and neutral in story integration, yeah, I actually put this in D tier. Sai Nijima. This is probably another one of the easy S tier palaces. Presentation wise, the casino aspect of this is handled perfectly. Music is great, like actually just great. The way in which you're kind of taken through rooms that are not combat focused and overall kind of actually making you feel like this place exists and it makes sense. It's not just someone's distortion. It's actually a place that has the distortion kind of layered onto it here. I was extremely immersed. Yes, also the way in which it is combined with the intro of the game is really cool as well. There was a lot of ways in which the map was close to being confusing, but actually more just rewarding good exploration. But it did kind of cross into that line every once in a while of being a bit tedious with navigation, just a little bit, but it is properly segmented to keep it from being too much. Overall, easy win for presentation. Story integration is flawless. I love the way that we are on the offensive, and yet we know because of the intro that things are going to go badly. So there's very much this cat and mouse feel with bringing in Akechi into this and then having the whole feel that it's all going to go wrong, but maybe we can pull it off, but maybe we're going to be in the know that things are going to go wrong, so we have things in place. I really liked the way that was all tied together there. And then the boss fight itself being one where you kind of had to figure out the mechanics was handled really well. I like boss fights like that where there's almost a little bit of difficulty removed to give you the, hey, try and figure out what's going on here by kind of reading the cues of what's going on around you. So it was a better puzzle boss than Madarame's. Overall, just Sai in her distortion here was something that I didn't actually expect that I was going to like her as a palace antagonist. But when they actually had her character kind of bringing out the stuff that made this distortion, actually a big deal, I really fell in love with it. So easy S tier. All right, so now we go to Shido. Shido is a weird one. This is probably one of those areas where I actually think I'm gonna rate it higher than it deserves. Presentation-wise, it's really strong. The feeling of being on this luxury VIP yacht super ship that's there to kind of have the rich and powerful get ready to escape the end of the world, but similar, but different enough, I would say, from Okumura's. I think the main thing that holds it back presentation-wise, the way it's so long, it's just a full journey in this palace. I think it's just a bit much. Story integration, he's in a lot of ways one of the it's weird to say this, but like I don't really like Shido as an antagonist, or sorry, as a villain basically. I would have liked to go more into him as a character. Akechi exists, so that's the more personal side of things there. A lot of the other characters besides Shido I think are great. It's like barely a positive, I would say. The boss fight and our villain antagonist here, this might actually be one of those areas where I think it's a full-on neutral, because I have to separate the presentation from the actual like boss fight and then the villain antagonist, themselves. And I think Shido is kind of neutral. The fight itself is good, but I do think that outside of the, hey, you get separated from your party and you have that big final duel kind of bit there, that's great. But the actual character of Shido, it's tough. It's really tough to rank him here. The main thing about this is that Shido represents basically what's wrong with the world of adults in Persona 5 Royal. I didn't feel that he as a character was, I don't know, just being this big threat here. It felt kind of just okay. I'm just going to keep him here. Yaldi and Mentos and the realization of what's actually going on here. I thought this was a very good horror setting. Presentation-wise is just, I would say, neutral. I almost want to give it a point just for how creepy it was and the way in which you find the other palace people and seeing that they're all under the thrall of this god here. Story integration, there's not really a lot to say here. Story integration, I think, was more just like, oh, okay, we are having a final kind of end cap on the story instead of just beating this dumb politician, we're gonna go kill God and stuff there. I think it's mostly the boss fight. Oh, there were a lot of cinematics and stuff with this as well, yeah. So maybe presentation does get a positive. But yeah, I think it's all about the boss fight, basically. This is a palace where you're basically banking everything on the actual like end finale. I'm gonna go with my gut. I'm just gonna give it a positive for the boss fight, and the others are neutral. Yeah. But yeah. This is the easiest part of the tier list right here. That's not even a question. I mean, this tier list basically makes itself with the way this is all set up here. Presentation-wise, this palace is fucking gorgeous. There's like, 4 or 5 unique environments and stuff. The music is phenomenal. The way in which it blends things with the combat sections to the, we're going to evaluate you with this kind of morality question bit here. That part in of itself just gave me so much good stuff to get into. The way that the story integration worked with tying things into the Rumi backstory, the way it fits into the themes of, what if the Phantom Thieves actually did get what they want. So many things to go in with this. Yeah, the stuff with the Akechi was wonderful. And then, of course, Maruki as the final boss antagonist. Not some god, not some impersonal force that we have no connection to or anything like that. Just a guy who really doesn't want to have people have to fight all their problems away themselves. But just be like, it's okay to run away. To say, this is too much pain. This is too much for me to handle. God, I love Maruki so much. That's easily the part that blows this into S+ tier for me. Because I would say that short of a couple minor details, I could easily do this, or I could see this being the case as well. Because size is probably like my favorite of the dungeons, palaces. If you take out just the boss side of things there, it's just that Maruki absolutely kicks ass in terms of the final boss antagonist and all that stuff as well. He's like if Yaldabaoth had the humanity and tragedy of Futaba. Yes, exactly. Biggest issue is the second phase of Maruki been scripted. Sure, you could say that also because of my experience, I didn't get the best fight out of Maruki because of how easy it was, because the balancing in this game is absolutely broken. There is nothing positive I can say about the RPG combat progression elements in Persona 5 Royal. It's absolutely non-existent in terms of balancing. Yeah, I can't really put that into the palaces themselves in terms of rating them. But that being said, what we did get with our antagonist and the corresponding fight and everything associated with that was fucking phenomenal. I think it's the reason why that I also kind of broke the game system in this one here is because I'd played Persona 4 Golden. If I'd played this one first, I wouldn't have min-maxed potentially as much. Yep, there's my tier list. I think if there was anything that could be switched here, I think I would put some kind of tier between A and B, and I would drop Yaldi and Shido into that tier. I think low A is a little high for him here, and I think B is a little low for Yaldi here. All right, let me know in the comments what you think about my tier list and what were your favorite things about the palaces in Persona 5 Royal and what were like your top 3. Like I saw some people saying that Futaba in S tier doesn't make sense as far as a palace goes, that other ones are more deserving. What's your like most underrated palace that you kind of disagree with this here? And be sure to check out my Baldur's Gate 3 Let's Play stuff on Twitch. All right, cool, YouTube done. Bye, YouTube.